It's Wednesday Addams. I see you're trying to distract yourself from your own banal thoughts. Let me help. Here's a recording thing made of my latest root canal.
Wednesday Season 2 is now playing, only on Netflix.
Welcome to a deep, dark, dank, mucus-filled, but still moist basement somewhere in the bowels of Georgia. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you can tell by the raspiness in my voice, I've got a head cold and some chest congestion. So we're going to try to get through this and edit out all the coughing fits that I have. But the weather has decided to be nice to us in the great state of Georgia. It's been quite nice the last couple of days. Even though I teach from home, the school funk has hit just about every teacher that I know. Nothing like coming back to work and getting all the germs. On the old Patreon front, we have some new members. If I can get it pulled up. We have the artist known as Jane, Miss Rhonda Pearson, the artist known as Tara, and Sarah Clark. Welcome to the show. All right, ladies and gents, when we left you last week, we had talked about how Brandi's car had been found and the authorities assumed that it was out of gas, and come to find out there was a chip missing in the key that they used. So, believing that the car was out of gas, authorities investigated the nearest gas stations and requested to see surveillance footage as well as show Brandi's photo to the employees working at said gas stations. Unfortunately, no one had any memory of seeing her, and no footage was ever found that showed anything related to her disappearance. Investigators began searching the area around the vehicle, including the opposite side of the interstate. Now, search dogs and cadaver dogs were brought in, but they did not alert on anything in the area. Since the car had sat for 6 days and it had rained a couple of times, hopes of finding a scent were low. Beginning their search in the wooded area closest to Brandi's car, authorities quickly realized that there was a frontage road not too far away. Frustrated and not sure where to begin, the Longview PD reached out to the FBI for assistance. Now, officers and agents did question the employees and management of the club, Grand Central Station. They were able to obtain surveillance footage of the night that Brandi was at the club. Other investigators began calling the numbers in the cell phone that was found in her car, as well as placing a call to the man whose name and number was written on the napkin. They are able to get in touch with the man, and he was willing to answer some questions. According to him, he had seen Brandi at the club that night, and he had approached her making small talk and offered to buy her a drink. She declined the drink offer, but prior to them parting ways, he said he did, in fact, write down his name and number and give it to her. Now, this man also provided authorities with what he had observed. He stated that he had overheard Brandi talking about needing gas money, and he was unaware if anyone had offered to help her or said that they would give her money. Now, employees at the club remembered seeing Brandi, but stated nothing out of the ordinary came to mind. Some employees stated that she had not drank at all that night, and others stated that they were pretty sure she had only had one drink. Surveillance camera footage was pulled, and using the timestamp of the license scanner, police began looking at the door camera in the minutes leading up to 10:44 p.m. That was the time that was indicated on the club's system that Brandi's license had been swiped. In the footage, authorities spot a woman who they believe is Brandi. Now, she is seen outside of the club talking with a man and then inside talking to a different man. Brandi's godmother, sister, and sister-in-law say that the woman could be Brandi, but they are not sure. The police wanted to get the footage out to the 6 o'clock news that evening, so they asked for a definitive answer one way or the other. And it is agreed upon that it, quote, unquote, could be Brandi. When the footage airs on the news that night, Ellen sees it and immediately knows the woman is unequivocally not Brandi. The woman resembled Brandi, has blonde hair and a similar body shape, but is wearing a completely different outfit. Now remember, Ellen knows exactly what Brandi was wearing because Brandi had come out and said, "Hey, how do I look?" So police are at a crossroads and do not know who to believe or what to believe. And sidebar here, I would go with the mother who said this is exactly what she was wearing, and that lady is not my daughter, but that's just me. Feeling that the video footage is the best lead they have, they argue that Brandi may have changed her clothes as she was prone to do prior to arriving at the club. Ellen is not picking up what the old popo is putting down. She believes that Brandi had changed her clothes. They either would have found clothes in her car or a friend would have come forward to acknowledge Brandi having changed clothes at her place that night in preparation for going to the club. When all is said and done, there's never been any evidence to suggest that Brandi was actually going to the club with any friends that night. So let's circle back to the old cell phone, the one that was discovered in her car. Investigators call every single person in the contacts. Oddly, some people acknowledge knowing Brandi, but not knowing her location. Others state that they have no idea who Brandi is. Investigators are unsure as to why Brandi would have the numbers of people who don't know her. The family is just as confused as the authorities and find the whole phone thing suspicious. While this is going on, Ellen is reaching out to all of the media sources she can think of in hopes of getting Brandi's story more publicity. She contacts every television station in Tyler, Longview, and even as far away as Shreveport, Louisiana. The local media runs the story, and Brandi's image and details of the night she disappeared are plastered across the television. But no leads are gained, and no one comes forward with additional information. On Thursday, August 17th, 2006, just 2 weeks after Brandi was last seen, the Longview Police Department made arrangements with Ellen to bring in a DNA sample of Brandi's so that they could put it into evidence just in case they ever needed to rule out a body or future evidence. It was during this visit to the station, investigators show Ellen the cell phone they found in the back of the car. Immediately upon seeing the cell phone, Ellen tells them, "That's not Brandi's phone." Police are shocked again and begin looking into the phone. So they're batting 0 for 2 with the old, that's her on the surveillance, and this is the phone. And like I said from the beginning, I don't feel like there's any gross negligence here or any shady dealings. I just feel like they didn't take in consideration someone that had seen her the night she disappeared. So upon further investigation, they do discover that the phone they have in custody is actually the phone of the man Brandi had dated previously. That's the man that had joined the military and was deployed overseas. He was required to leave his personal cell phone behind, and it appears that Brandi kept it. Now, police have been just spinning their wheels investigating, trying to track down all these leads about this phone, and the whole time, it's not even hers. It actually turns out that Brandi's phone was on a contract with her ex-boyfriend's sister. So authorities file a subpoena to obtain the records. Ellen, and I have to, hats off to this mother. You know, she's done everything she possibly could do. She says, "Here, hold my beer." And she picks up the phone, calls the ex-boyfriend's sister, and says, "Hey, Brandi's missing. I need you to release the records of the cell phone to the authorities." The woman not only granted police access, but she even printed off the records related to Brandi's cell phone and mailed them to Ellen. Now, the phone records show some odd behavior, which immediately raised some eyebrows with investigators as well as that of Ellen. In the days after Brandi's disappearance, there were no outbound calls made from the phone, but many calls were placed to the phone. Most of those were by friends and family trying to locate Brandi. However, beginning on August the 11th, approximately 9 days after the last day that Brandi was seen, the phone records show multiple calls being made over the course of several days. The calls are short, no more than 2 or 3 minutes, and there is a great deal of them. For authorities, it's a question of who is in possession of the phone. They believe that there could be a possible link between whoever has the phone and Brandi's disappearance. So the authorities once again reach out to the FBI and hoping to get some much needed assistance in tracking down this phone and who could possibly have it. Ellen begins calling all of the numbers in Brandi's phone, and also the numbers that has contacted the phone since she disappeared. Of those who actually would speak to Ellen, no one admits to knowing Brandi. Now, the FBI managed to track down the phone, and 2 individuals who were in possession of it were brought in for questioning, a man and his niece, and according to their statements, the phone was given to them by a third individual. So the authorities tracked down this third person, and they discovered that he was known to them as someone who had been in some quote-unquote legal troubles before. When questioned about the phone, the man claimed that he had been walking down the street on or about on or around August 11th when he had heard a beeping sound. He follows the sound and finds the phone under a tree and decided to just take it home with him. Authorities are like, I smell some fuckery. And the reason their little spidey senses are tingling is because how could an uncharged phone have maintained its battery power outside in the elements for 9 straight days? The phone was claimed to have been found in a pretty rough part of Longview, aka Southside. And Sergeant Lair later stated, quote, "It's one of those places you got to mean to go there to end up there. It's in a very high crime area. It's an area known for crack cocaine trafficking. It is not an area that you would have ever thought Brandi Wells would have ever been on her own," end quote. The location where the phone was allegedly found is only a few blocks away from a road which connects to I-20 right at the exit where Brandi's car had been found. At this time, authorities asked the woman and her uncle if they were willing to submit to a polygraph test, which, against Coach and I's better judgment, they accepted, but they passed. The third man who, quote-unquote, found the phone under the tree was offered a polygraph and declined. Very smart on his part, especially since he's had previous legal troubles. Now, this man has never been named publicly, but he is considered to be a person of interest. Sergeant Lair explained, quote, "I do believe he knows more about the circumstances about how and what he found than he's willing to tell, but other than the fact that he was once in possession of the phone, I have no way and no reason to say he could have had anything to do with Brandi's disappearance," end quote. So with no evidence against the man who found the phone, no major leads on the case, and nowhere to go, investigators continue working the case. Any leads that were able to develop quickly dry up, and the case starts to grow cold. In the weeks following Brandi's disappearance, Ellen continues to watch the surveillance footage the police released to the news. She makes notes of all the reasons why she does not believe the person in the footage is Brandi, including but not limited to her body language, and the clothing she's wearing. Ellen's sister, frustrated with the progress of the case, requests that authorities allow her to view all of the footage, not just the section they believe shows Brandi. So within 10 minutes, her husband spots Brandi, and it was not the woman they had previously shown on the news. According to investigators, the misidentification was the result of a difference in the timestamps. The license swapper indicated that Brandi had entered the club at 10:40 p.m. or 10:44 p.m. But that time was not accurate. Brandi was actually spotted entering the club at 10:35 p.m. She is, in fact, wearing the clothing that Ellen had described since day one. Investigators now have confirmation of Brandi, but there's a growing frustration within the family. How is it possible that in their search for Brandi, and even after Ellen said, "That is not my daughter," the authorities hadn't gone back to watch more of the footage? The positive identification does not occur until 6 weeks after Brandi disappeared. 6 weeks. Examination of the new footage shows Brandi entering the club by herself, swapping her license. She spends some time in the club by herself and eventually leaves just after midnight. Now, there is a point of contention between the family and the police. Another one. Police have stated repeatedly that Brandi left the club by herself. The family maintains to this day that she may have been with someone. In the final shot of the footage showing Brandi walking out of the door, she is immediately followed by a man in a black shirt, wearing a white cowboy hat. Now, Brandi continues walking towards the right of the camera while the man turns left. But in the final seconds of the footage, you can see Brandi's feet and her shadow, and they clearly turn following the same direction the man was seen heading. Now, some believe that this man called out her name or waved her over, while others believe Brandi may have been going towards someone else. Now, there's another camp that says that Brandi may have taken the right out of the club and headed in the wrong direction, realized, nope, my car's not over there, it's actually over here, and pivoted, and that's why you see her shadow and her feet turn the other way. Now, the man in the cowboy hat has been debated back and forth as a possible suspect for a long time, but as far as the public is aware, law enforcement does not consider him a suspect. During the period following the actual verification of Brandi's identification in the video, is when the rift between the family and the police begins to grow wider and wider and wider. Ellen has expressed frustration with the fact that authorities have told her they cannot allow her to have the names or contact information of anyone in their investigation, which I understand. And I know it would be frustrating as a parent because you want to help. You want to try to fix this. You want to try to find your daughter. They also tell Ellen that without specific information, they had to, I don't know, it was too large of an area, too great of an area. I guess the dragnet was too wide to examine for any searches to be effectively conducted. Now, I have a problem with this. I don't give a rat's ass if it's 10 square miles. You're talking about a club. Just start right there and start spiraling outwards and do more than one search. That one I do have a problem with. So, luckily, Ellen's sister, Brandi's aunt, had a friend who was working for the FBI who they had contacted with their frustrations and just said, look, man, this is what we're getting from the local PD. Well, this person tells the aunt to contact the Laura Recovery Center. Now, the Laura Recovery Center was founded by Bob Smith after the abduction and murder of his 12-year-old daughter from Friendswood, Texas in April of 1997. The center specializes and focuses on conducting searches for children. In Brandi's case, however, she was a 23-year-old young lady. But due to the fact that she was enrolled in college and because of the failure of law enforcement to contribute much to the search efforts, the center agrees to take the case on. Representatives from the center aided in the production and distribution of additional flyers in Brandi's case. On September 26, 2006, they conduct their first search with the initial search area beginning with the area around the nightclub. Crazy. Weird. Longview itself was divided into different quadrants to search as well. Now, remember, the club is surrounded by a wooded area and also has that frontage road or back roads with some difficult terrain that could offer many different possible locations that could hide a body. So the center begins searching in a radius around the club and slowly works their way further and further out. The search brought in hundreds of local volunteers, members of the center, and some law enforcement officers. The search team employed four-wheelers, horses, and cadaver dogs. Ultimately, their plan was to expand the radius and cover all areas between the club and the location at which Brandi's car was discovered. While search efforts were highly skilled and dedicated, they didn't turn up anything. The failure to discover anything is disheartening to the family and to Brandi's friends, but at the same time, it does allow them to keep hope alive that Brandi may still be alive somewhere out there. So on October 6th of 2006, Ellen would face the grim possibility that Brandi may have been murdered. A citizen called police, notified them of a fire burning in an oil field approximately 11 miles from Longview in the town of Kilgore, Texas. When responders arrived at the scene, it was discovered that the fire was actually a body that had been set on fire. And due to the extensive damage from the flames, the appearance of the victim could not be determined. Cursory examination of the remains determined that it was a body of a white or possibly Hispanic female between the ages of 17 and 25. Along with the remains, investigators discovered a purple sweater and a pair of jeans, as well as $40 in the pocket. The victim was described as weighing between 100 and 120 pounds, standing between 5'3" and 5'5" inches. Her hair was thought to be reddish blonde or possibly blonde with red highlights. A gas can was found at the scene, and further examination discovered semen indicating that the victim had been raped. Due to an extensive damage from the fire, the unidentified woman's face was reconstructed by a forensic artist. Now, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released a digital composite. When Ellen saw the reconstruction on the news, she couldn't help but see a resemblance to Brandi, though she wasn't 100% sure. Through the use of a DNA comparison, authorities were able to rule out Brandi as the woman that was set afire, who they have now named the Lavender Doe, and she remains unidentified to this day. And what I could find was there was a suspect in that case, a man named Joseph Wayne Burnett. He was a convicted sex offender, but he denies any involvement, and obviously they don't have any evidence to tie him directly to it. While the discovery had shaken Brandi's family, they were relieved to know that the remains were not hers. At the same time, they were back to having no idea of what could possibly have happened to Brandi. During this time, her family held a memorial for her in a local park in hopes of stirring up interest and getting more attention to her case, as well as celebrating her life. Now, it was during this time that they saw a woman who had previously alleged to have spent time with Brandi in the club that night. Now, according to this woman, she and Brandi had met at the club and got to talking. During their conversation, a Hispanic man is alleged to have been following them around and making the two ladies uncomfortable. The two women would go to the bathroom together in hopes of losing the man. However, When this woman was asked to bring her story to authorities, she explained that she didn't wish to get involved to that level. What? You don't want to get involved? Then why the fuck bring it up? But anyway, as the holidays began approaching, Brandi's 24th birthday would come and go with no new information in her case. On November 28, 2006, Ellen reached out to the Laura Recovery Center again, and they were able to conduct a second search. This time, however, the resources were a little bit more limited due to a child that had gone missing and with around that same time, and most of the team was involved in that search. Local interest in Brandi's case seemed to be dwindling, and just like the first search, the second one did not turn up any viable information. So in January of 2007, Ellen got in contact with Texas EquiSearch, who agreed to launch a third search for Brandi. Much like the second search, resources were limited due to the disappearance of another child, and local volunteers were simply not able to be at two places at once. The third search only consisted of 5 people, including 2 representatives from Texas EquiSearch, Ellen, her husband, Brandi's stepdad, and Brandi's sister, Georgia. After the January search, Brandi's case began getting even colder. Days would turn to weeks, weeks would turn to months, and months started turning to years. And it would be over a year after Brandi's disappearance that there were, I don't know, not a blip on the radar, but maybe the case had a pulse. And basically it was because over 1,000 miles away in Raleigh, North Carolina, an unknown woman applied for a job. While filling out her job application, this woman provided a local address, and when asked for her social security number, the one she wrote down was actually Brandi's. The number came back as a hit on a missing person, and the local police were notified. They visit the business and were able to obtain an address for the woman who filled out her application. They found the address to be an apartment complex, so they knocked on the door, and they were greeted by an ex-military guy who had only recently returned from active duty. And no, before your little mind wanders, it's not Brandi's ex-boyfriend. When shown the application and asked about the name of the person listed, he stated that he had no idea who that was, and he had no connection to that woman. The man was also shown images of Brandi, though he also reported not knowing who she was either. The woman who filled out the application has never been identified or has never come forward. How she came into possession of Brandi's social security number remains unknown. A specific date of when this incident occurred has never been verified, though it is believed to have happened between August of 2007 and June of 2008. In the years since Brandi disappeared, there has been little to no movement. When asked about the status of the case in August of 2016, the 10-year anniversary of Brandi's disappearance, Christy Bryan, a spokesperson for the Longview Police Department, responded with, quote, "We have not received many new leads over the past few years. When we receive new leads or information, those leads and information are investigated. At this time, there is no new information that we have to release beyond what we have previously released in the past," end quote. When asked about the involvement of police and their handling of the case, Ellen said, quote, "I have not heard anything about anything. They never really would keep in touch with me. It was really hard to get in touch with them. There was a lot of things I ended up doing. It was kind of a frustrating deal where they didn't take this seriously. I followed a lot of leads," end quote. Over the years since Brandi disappeared, there's been a great deal of speculation There have been tips that can't be verified, and in 2010, Ellen received a phone call from a man who called himself Tim. Tim stated that Brandi was alive and living in Kansas City and then immediately hung up. He has never called back, and it was never verified if the phone call came from somewhere local or actually from Kansas City. It wasn't until later that Ellen became aware of how active human trafficking in the area of Tyler and Longview was. And by active, there are several documented trafficking rings that have operated in those two towns over the years. Despite all of the effort put forward by the family over these years, Brandi's case has fallen out of the spotlight for the locals. Many have just moved on or simply have never heard about her case. The amount of people on forums who live in the area who have never heard about her case is actually quite shocking and heartbreaking at the same time. Now we get into theories. There are essentially three working theories revolving around the disappearance of Brandi Wells. The first theory is that Brandi may have been abducted by someone she knew or perhaps someone she thought she knew. Now, many believe that when Brandi made plans to go to Graham Central Station in Longview, it was not because she wanted to drive that far, but perhaps she had made arrangements to meet someone there, be it a friend or perhaps a new romantic interest. The second theory is that Brandi's disappearance may be a stranger abduction situation. Many believe that Brandi either met someone at the club that night, was followed by someone after leaving, or perhaps was approached by someone pretending to be a quote-unquote Good Samaritan after she had run out of gas. Now, the belief is that whoever was responsible for her disappearance likely didn't know her and may have been completely random, which is scary as hell. Then the last theory is that Brandi's disappearance is directly related to human trafficking. The area from which she disappeared is known to have human trafficking rings, and it is not uncommon for individuals to troll nightclubs in hopes of finding women there by themselves who are easy targets. Now, a lot has changed in the nearly 20 years since Brandi Wells walked out of her mother's apartment, never to return. The grief her family has dealt with has been devastating, and while they have tried to move forward, it's impossible for something as heartbreaking to not cause irreparable damages. Ellen and her husband eventually separated, both dealing with their grief in their own way. Both were unable to come to terms with Brandi's disappearance. And when Brandi vanished, she had two nieces, both babies at the time, who are now young women nearly her age. They never got to know their aunt nor spend time with her. Brandi has had a niece and a nephew born since her disappearance. Her paternal grandparents, to whom she was very close, have passed away, as has Ellen's brother, which was Brandi's uncle. Brandi was 23 years old when she vanished on August 2nd, 2006. At the time of her disappearance, she was a Caucasian female with brown hair, brown eyes, standing between 4'11" and 5 foot tall, weighing approximately 120 to 130 pounds. Brandi often answered to the nicknames Boo or Blinky, with the latter being given to her due to her habit of blinking frequently. Both of her ears are pierced once each, and the night she vanished, she had French tips on her nails. She was last seen in the vicinity of 1016 McKenna Road in Longview, Texas, at the Graham Central Station nightclub, which has since closed. Brandi drove a black 2000 Pontiac Grand Prix with the license plate J50ZTD. The car was discovered on the westbound shoulder of I-20 just outside of Longview. And that's basically the facts of the case and the little story that I've concocted. Not story, but I mean narrative that I have made. Just going over some of the things to revisit some of them. Brandi's mother has never given up hope that someday Brandi would be found and she would receive answers to what happened to her daughter. Brandi's sister and Ellen's youngest daughter, Georgia, is now older than Brandi the last time she saw her and has gone on to carve out her own life. Ellen takes great pride and joy in having watched her children forge their dreams, and she can't help but wonder what Brandi would be today if she were here. What life would she be leading? How many grandchildren would she have provided Ellen? All Ellen can do now, outside of the photographs and the memories, is watch the surveillance footage. And it's heartbreaking to hear Ellen say that anytime she misses her baby, she goes and watches that footage. And Brandi will forever be enshrined in that footage as the last time anyone knew where she was. And like I said, it's gut-wrenching to just know that Ellen, from time to time, watches a grainy surveillance video because she misses her baby. Brandi Wells' case, like I had stated earlier, was the first episode of the Investigation Discovery Channel's show Disappeared. It originally aired on December 10th, 2009. And over 15 years later, information and evidence regarding her case remains as it was back then. The Disappeared episode was the peak of the coverage on Brandi's case, and over the years, Brandi's family has fought to keep her name in the spotlight, but sadly, it has faded from public knowledge. And I sadly was one of those. This was a listener request. News articles are few and far between. Internet forums discuss the case, but not to the extent that many others are talked about. It seems apparent to me personally that someone in the Longview or Tyler area has either the answers and knows exactly what happened to Brandi, or they know just enough that could break this case wide open. Unfortunately, the mistakes by the investigators, mistaken identity in the surveillance video, and just general misfortune in this case seems to make this go extremely cold, extremely quick. And I wanted to touch on the theories a little bit more in depth, just on my personal opinion. And, by all means, you can just stop it here if you want to. But with very little evidence available, and that evidence not pointing in a specific direction, you've got those three possible scenarios of that evening that she disappeared. Now, her disappearance may be tied to either someone she knew in her personal life or someone she had recently met and was planning to get to know better. Brandi's life saw her come in contact with a lot of people in her short 23 years. Any of the people she met along the way could have played a role in her disappearance. Now, a lot of the acquaintances have been ruled out. Her ex-husband, roommate, ex-boyfriend, all of the men in her life that they know about have been cleared and weren't known to be in the area at the time Brandi went missing. One detail which seems to make it very unlikely that Brandi may have been abducted or attacked by someone she knew was her secrecy about that night. And it's not so much that she lied, kind of like Ellen stated when she found out she wasn't going to the club in Tyler. It was the fact that she just didn't divulge that information. So it was a little, shady, a little secretive. Everything I saw in my research stated that there were only 3 people who knew that Brandi was going to Graham Central Station in Longview. Her sister, her godmother, and then Jeanette Green, the bartender at the bowling alley. And Jeanette only knew or found out because she asked Brandi that evening what her plans were. That's when she tells her, hey, I'm headed to Longview to this club. So there is the possibility that Brandi could have told someone else or tried to make arrangements with other people to meet there. The fact that she told her mother, Ellen, that she was meeting friends there does seem a little odd if she was not intent on actually meeting someone, especially since we have the surveillance footage and it shows her walking in alone. She didn't tell Ellen where she was going, so why would she lie about meeting people? So that's the kind of thing going on here. And like I said, she really didn't lie. She just didn't tell her. But the theory is, if you're not going to tell her where you're going, why tell her you're meeting someone? Was it possible that Brandi had intended to meet a specific person there? Could it be that she didn't want the third degree from Ellen about going almost an hour away all by herself? Both of those are plausible. We do know that she called the club not once but twice for directions. Now, Graham Central Station was obviously not a place that Brandi was familiar with, and considering that it was a 45-minute drive and the fact that she was low on gas, it's hard to believe she'd gone all that way unless there was a specific reason for her to go to that particular club. People have speculated that she may have met someone online and that the club may have been like a midway point or a spot that they agreed to meet up at. Now, this is an interesting angle, but authorities have stated that both Brandi's computer and her phone were examined forensically, and there was nothing to indicate that she had made plans with anyone digitally. Her phone activity that night shows her calling the club, but no one else. If she was planning to meet someone and had gotten lost, you would think that she would have called said person or sent said person a text explaining, "Hey, I'm running late." Surveillance footage doesn't show Brandi with anyone else inside the club, and multiple patrons of the club, along with employees, specifically told investigators that she was clearly there alone. It is plausible that she could have met up with someone who she knew prior to this night, or who she may have been making arrangements to meet for the first time, and it just wasn't captured on the surveillance cameras. Both investigators and Brandi's family believe that this would have had to have been planned out and premeditated because there was only a handful of people who knew Brandi's true destination. So this makes it more unlikely that someone could have simply come upon her and used said relationship as a means of tricking her so that they could abduct her. Now, authorities have never discovered any motives as to why someone Brandi knew would have planned to do this to her. She didn't have a bad reputation. She wasn't on anyone's bad side. And she had only returned to the area around Tyler recently. The second theory suggests that Brandi may have been abducted by a total stranger, which is the worst case scenario. This just scares the shit out of me. Because for investigators, this seems to be a more likely scenario than any of the other ones, especially her being abducted by someone she knew, according to authorities. So we do know she was at the club alone, and she could have run into almost anybody who may have had some bad intentions that night. We also know that she was not hiding the fact that she needed some money for gas so that she could return home. Not a very bright move on her spot or her point. But the spot where her car was found, coupled with the gas situation, could have made her more vulnerable to the possibility that someone posing as a helpful person could have gained Brandi's trust just long enough for her to let her guard down and them to snatch her. Now, an internet angle on this is that there are 3 individuals related to the club who may have had some connection with Brandi's disappearance. Now, this is the internet at its finest. So, and it's not a bad angle. They speculate that the first is the man who claims that he offered to buy her a drink. She turned him down, but he wrote his name down on the napkin along with his number. People point to the fact that most men who offer to buy a lady a drink that get turned down usually do not engage them past that point. And as a male, I will have to agree with that. Now, it is possible she dismissed the drink, not because she was not interested, but that she was just not that much of a drinker. Remember, when she went to the bowling alley, she only drank that one, like half of that drink. The man stated that she mentioned needing money for gas. if he was willing to buy her a drink, why would he not be willing to give her some money for gas? Well, let me answer that for you. And this could easily be explained as he didn't have any cash on him, and maybe he wasn't ready to leave and go buy her some gas. Maybe he was there with some friends of his and he just was like, look, I'll buy this lady a drink, and hey, I need some gas. Well, I'm not ready to leave, so that's on you. Along this same line, what if he had bought her the gas and he wrote his name and his number down on the napkin as a way to make sure that she did call him? I don't know. I really just, in the research, I personally don't think he had anything to do with her disappearance. I think he was just there, found her cute, found her attractive, saw that she was alone, shot his shot, offered to buy a drink. She turned him down. And the way it kind of plays out in my head is that she wasn't rude about turning down the drink. It was, no, thank you. One of those situations. And then she loved to talk to people, and she may have just started chatting him up. And, even though he had, his shot didn't hit the mark, he felt confident enough in their conversation that he left his name and number on a napkin. Just my 2 cents. It's just like, what you play out in your head when you do these researches. It's just try to find something less evil. Now, the second person the internet claims that could be at the club that night and had spent time with Brandi was that unidentified woman. Remember, she told people at the park, and I don't know if she told her mother. I don't think she told her mother, because Ellen comes across as the woman that would have drugged that woman, the unidentified woman, to the police department. But anyway, this is the lady that had chatted. They had chatted for a while, and there was this creepy Hispanic male that was following them. So they head to the women's room together in hopes that this guy would lose track of them. So if there is surveillance footage of this woman and Brandi talking, there is a high probability that this unidentified woman was in fact contacted by authorities. Now, on the other hand, when this woman was telling her story and was asked to go to the authorities, and she said, quote, I don't want to get involved like that, end quote, people have come forward who have claimed to have known this woman and remember seeing her at the park and said that this lady's just not very mentally stable, and she will often make shit up, which just gripes my ass. I can't mentally put myself in a position where you as a person want to interject yourself into an investigation and you have no reason to. Like, what's your end game? I just can't put myself in that headspace. The third person the internet thinks could be the man who exited the club immediately after Brandi owned the surveillance footage. He was dressed in a dark shirt and the white cowboy hat. Other than that, there's no other information out there about that man that I could find. Now, authorities may know exactly who he is and may have checked him off, but you would think if that's the case, they would have said, hey, we found this old boy and he's clear. So even the camera angle that shows this guy is mounted on a wall that angle obscures most of his face because of the brim of his cowboy hat. The security camera footage shows Brandi heading towards the right, like I said previously, while this man in the cowboy hat turns left. And if you watch that investigation discovery episode, you can see this video. And at the top of the frame, you can see Brandi's feet, and they turn back to the left. And then you can continually see her shadow moving in the direction of the left until it's out of sight. So remember, the theory is that the guy in the cowboy hat either called out to Brandi or somehow got her attention, and that's why she turned left to follow him. Others have said no, Brandi simply just walked out, went to the right, thinking that's where she had parked, and got about, I don't know, as far as she did, and realized, nope, I parked over here. And she pivoted and walks that way. While the person is certainly someone you would like to speak to, there's nothing tying him to her disappearance other than him happened to walk out behind her. If he could be identified, maybe he saw her get into her car, or maybe he saw her talking to someone else. Again, you would think if authorities had spoken to this man in the cowboy hat, they would have actually, made it public knowledge. Now, the most plausible working theory that investigators have is the possibility that Brandi was either followed from the club that night, and when she experienced car trouble, the person following her used this as an opportunity to abduct her, or when she ran into car trouble, someone driving by used it as an opportunity to abduct her. Now, it's not hard to fathom that someone could have stopped that night and offered Brandi some assistance when she pulled over to the side of the road. If she were out of gas, as many people have speculated, that would explain the presence of the gas can in her car. But remember, Brandi's mother, Ellen, and her roommate stated they didn't believe she owned a gas can. Now, the unknown assailant could have offered Brandi the gas can or offered her a ride to the nearest gas station to fill up said gas can. We know Brandi didn't have any money for gas, so this person could have offered to pay for it and may have even told her that he or she would go fill this container up and bring it back to her. That may have been just enough to establish just a little bit of trust with Brandi. So when they get back, Brandi could have seen them pull back up, realizing that's the same person, gotten out of her car, or had the door unlocked and the window down just enough that said person comes in, opens the door, grabs her, and abducts her. Now, if we are thinking that a passerby was the assailant, then the possibilities are infinite when it comes to suspects. I don't think she was grabbed on the side of the road simply because of the position of the car's driver's seat. It was so far back that Brandi would not have been able to reach the pedals. And remember, Ellen stated that her husband, who was 6'4", had actually sat down in the car, and that's where the position of the seat would have been if he was driving it. The other knock against the theory that the abduction went down on the side of I-20 is there was only one partial thumbprint found in the car. Forensically, that car was clean. Basically, somebody wiped it down and missed a partial thumbprint. Personally, that leads me to think she was abducted somewhere else and the car was purposely abandoned on the side of the interstate where they found it as a red herring. Now, we do know that Brandi didn't know the area and she had gotten lost heading to the club. So it's not hard to imagine she could have gotten lost when leaving the club and actually ended up in a bad area where she became a victim of opportunity. When looking at the car, we do know for certain that it was abandoned on I-20 off the westbound lane between Shreveport and Longview, headed back towards Tyler. We also know that Brandi's keys were missing along with her cell phone, but her purse, ID, and wallet were all left in the car. If she had run out of gas and was walking to a gas station, why would she only take her keys and phone and leave everything else behind? Now, she could have agreed to get into someone else's vehicle and she didn't feel safe enough bringing those other items with her. But again, my question is, why would you not bring that? In case you had to make a run for it, you would have some sort of your personal belongings. Brandi didn't have any credit cards. She didn't have any cash. So it's not like she had anything of value that someone could rob her of, except her phone. Now, the phone was found in someone else's possession weeks after her disappearance. According to this man's story, he found it outside beeping, and I don't buy this for a damn second. Short of Brandi having the original Nokia brick phone that we all had, I don't know of a single cell phone since then that could hold a charge for 9 straight days. Allegedly, the man who found it claims that it was under a tree not too far from where Brandi's car was found. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Brandi could have walked away from the car having experienced some sort of car trouble and continued to walk trying to get a signal on her cell phone, or she could have been trying to walk to a more populated area to ask for help and she was abducted along that path. Honestly, don't believe the man's story of how he came into possession of Brandi's phone. I would bet heavy that he knows more than he's saying. The one detail in his theory or in his story that gives me pause is that whoever abducted Brandi was smart enough to wipe her car down and take her somewhere she's never been found. The person that found their phone doesn't seem smart enough to have done that. And it doesn't seem like this person that was smart enough to remove her from the area would have been dumb enough to not keep her phone or destroy it so it could never be found and make a bunch of damn calls from it. So if we're on the angle of two people abducting her, I still don't believe the mastermind wiping the car down, removing her from the scene, taking her somewhere else would be dumb enough to allow the hired help to keep the fucking phone. I just don't. It just doesn't make any sense. I truly believe that she was abducted. And let me back up. Now, people are going to come in and say, well, the hired help could have just kept the phone without him knowing it. I don't buy it. Someone that smart is not going to leave someone less intelligent than them an opportunity for them to get caught. Okay, my personal opinion, I know you've been hanging on pins and needles. I truly believe she was abducted or kidnapped somewhere else and her car was left where it was found to throw investigators off the trail. The gas can could have really been Brandi's, and her mom and her roommate just were not aware that she had a tendency to run out of gas, and she kept one with her. All indications seem to suggest that whoever committed this crime against Brandi was unknown to her. The question of motive leads you to the theory that has more motive than method. Many who have studied this case believe it's possible that Brandi may have been the victim of human traffickers. It is well documented. I've talked about it, and you can look it up yourself, that Tyler, Longview, and Shreveport are known to have trafficking rings in them. According to multiple studies, there have been over 300,000 victims of human trafficking in Texas alone, which means it's not out of the realm of possibility for Brandi to have been trafficked. At the time of her disappearance, she was 23 years old at a club alone, driving a vehicle that may or may not have had the ability to get her home. Multiple studies have shown that traffickers frequent clubs and work in teams looking for individuals who seem vulnerable. Brandi likely would have been in their crosshairs the moment she walked in alone. The trafficker could have overheard her asking for gas money and used that as a means to get her out of the club and by herself. Brandi was a very social young lady, and it would not have taken someone very long to have struck up a conversation with her, learning details which may have made her even more vulnerable. Someone working a trafficking ring would have been experienced enough to have wiped down the vehicle of Prince and then abandoned the car along I-20. By the time authorities were on to Brandi's case, days had passed and even more time would pass before they tied the car to her. If it were a trafficking scenario, Brandi could have been halfway on the other side of the planet by the time her car is tied to her disappearance. Again, traffickers would have known the seedier side of town and known that by throwing her phone in such an area, someone's going to pick it up and lead authorities down another path that is further and further away from what actually happened. It is not impossible to imagine someone could have followed Brandi from the club with the intent of abducting her, got her attention under the ruse of asking a question or for direction, and Brandi's caring nature and desire to help others would have opened her up to the risk of being taken advantage of. One key piece of information in the investigation was the use of Brandi's Social Security number years after her disappearance. I do believe that this was just a case of identity theft. It does not make a lot of sense if you are connected to her disappearance that you would use a known missing person's Social Security number. The disappearance of Brandi Wells is a disturbing and poignant case. If Brandi were alive today, she would be 42 years old, about to turn 43 in November. The incredible pain of a parent a sibling, an aunt, or an uncle trying to grasp the fact that someone they love so dearly absolutely vanished off the face of the earth without explanation is extremely overwhelming. Brandi's mother continues to advocate for her daughter, and unfortunately, Brandi's case has faded from the media. It's a case full of questions with few, if any, answers. Someone knows exactly what happened to Brandi Wells that fateful August night, and this person or persons have the ability to stop a family from suffering and grant them the small closure they deserve. The case of Brandi Wells remains open, unsolved, and extremely cold. If you're looking for more information about the disappearance of Brandi Wells, there are a few message boards and newspaper articles available. Investigation Discovery's Disappeared's first episode covers Brandi's case. The podcast Unfound conducted a thorough and long interview with Brandi's mother, which was a vital tool in clarifying a lot of information in my research, so shout out to them. If you have any information about the disappearance of Brandi Wells, please contact the Longview Police Department at 903-237-1199 or contact the FBI. And as always, let us know what you think happened to Brandi. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up our case about Brandi Wells. Now, as for a recommendation, I'm going to actually recommend the Sean Ryan Show. And he interviews AJ Gentile. And if that name does not ring a bell for you, he is the man behind the Why Files. And it is a great interview. It is relaxing. It's not too heavy. They do get into a little bit of a heavy spot about midway through it. It's a long interview, but they cover a lot of stuff, and it's great. I watched it and have a newfound respect for AJ Gentile. I don't like the hecklefish, but to each his own. But if you are a friend of the Why Files, you get to see a side of AJ that you don't normally see on his channel. And if you've never heard of the Why Files, first ask yourself how. But he's got a lot of great stuff on his channel. So that's my recommendation for the week. As always, ladies and gentlemen, be good, be kind, and if at all possible, help someone out this week. Deuces.